Hello there, my name is Liambughood. I'm a 16-year-old phonograph collector from Pennsylvania, and today I'm going to show you the basics of rebuilding a Victor exhibition reproducer. Now, as you can see here, I have all the core components of an exhibition reproducer. I'm going to show you what each of these is, and then I'm going to show you basically how to put it back together and do a complete rebuild of this reproducer. And I'll also show you all the materials and, all the tools that you need to do this. These are all the materials and the core components of a reproducer. So I'll show you them one by one. The first thing, and probably the most important thing, you're going to need is mica diaphragm. Now these diaphragms are very, very thin, and they have a small hole in the center. Now this is a new diaphragm. I believe I bought it from Brian Parlier. He runs a phonograph shop, and he sells these. But the original diaphragms on these can often be reused, actually. If the diaphragm does not have any sort of major cracks or is not delaminating, which I believe occurs after the reproducer is, or if the reproducer is overloaded, then you can actually just reuse the original diaphragm. And to check if a diaphragm is good, one technique that I've heard is that you can drop it, and if it makes a ping sound when being dropped, then you know that it's good. So you can hear it makes a loud, distinct pinging sound. So I'll drop it again, like that. So this diaphragm is pretty much good. It's in great cosmetic condition and has no issues at all. So that is the diaphragm. Next is the insulators, or the gaskets. Now this is 1/8 of an inch gasket tubing. It is also from Brian Parlier, but a lot of people sell this gasket material. It's rubber, and it is meant to go inside of a body of a reproducer, and it's supposed to basically snugly secure the diaphragm and prevent it from, while it's vibrating, prevent it from hitting the body of a reproducer. And these gaskets, they are very thin and pretty small, and oftentimes when you buy them nowadays, you are going to have to cut them yourself. I don't really have much of a figure for exactly how much length you should cut off of them, but I do have a general tip when cutting diaphragm gaskets, or when cutting gaskets. I suggest basically taking this part of the body of a reproducer, and then, I hope this is showing up on camera, and then basically taking the gasket tubing and cutting off a little more than what actually fits inside of a body, and then keep cutting down until it just barely overlaps, like less than a millimeter of overlap. Once you have very little overlap, and you can still do that, and it can snugly be secured in there, that's when you know you have basically the right length. And this is maybe like a 1/10 of a millimeter too long, but when a reproducer, or when a diaphragm is put in there, it stays put, and it does not overlap. You can see it does not overlap much, really, at all. So, yeah, and I've cut both of these pieces of tubing just like that. So, the next thing is the needle bar, and this is what's going to actually hold your steel needles in the needle chuck right there. That hole is where you put a needle, and then this hole is where you screw in the needle thumb screw. And I have the needle thumb screw right here. And this is a small screw. It just goes in this hole. This is not an original thumb screw for a Victor exhibition, I believe. This is from my friend Wyatt Marcus. He gave me this thumb screw because the one that I had on this reproducer was actually stripped. The hole was stripped of its threads. So, yeah. And on these needle bars, you're going to want to have, obviously, the needle bar foot, which should have a tiny, tiny little hole in it, in the flat section, and this hole is where a very, very small screw is going to secure into. I'm not sure if it'll show up on camera. I'm just going to lean over to make sure it does. But this screw that focus camera. This screw that I'm holding in my hand goes into this hole in this needle bar. And it goes there. Oh, there we go. So you see that screw, and then the needle bar has that hole in it. And this goes into the hole from one side of a mica to the other, basically. And that's the diaphragm needle bar foot screw. I don't know if there's a name for it. And then, of course, there's going to be 2 screws right here on the needle bar that hold these springs in place. And then through the other holes on the springs, these holes are actually oblong, so they're not, like, very snug. You can see that. There's these screws that go in, and then there's washers, or nuts, that go on the other side. And these are going to snugly screw into and, like, against this section. So the needle bar is going to be mounted on these little pivot sections, these little fulcrums. It's going to be mounted like that, and those screw in there, and that's how it is. That's how it's going to be. And then we have this bezel part. This actually is different on certain exhibitions. Older ones, I believe, had a longer neck that would extend out, but this one doesn't. And it's basically just the bezel that goes on the back of a reproducer, and there are 3 holes in it for screws, these on the edge, which correspond to 3 holes right here. And then, of course, there are 2 holes right here, which are where the holes for the flange screws line up. And this is the flange. This is also called an isolator, and it's basically to provide an airtight seal and allow for a reproducer to snugly fit onto a tone arm with this little brass insert, which has a pin in it. I'm not sure. Does the camera focus yet? There's a pin in it. And then finally, of course, we have the screws for that, which these are the flange screws. You can see part of it is not threaded. Oh, there we go. Part of it is not threaded. This is wobbling. I'll put that there. Oh. These are not threaded on a section of it. And those parts that aren't threaded go all the way through here in the flange holes. In the holes in the flange for the screws, and then they come out the other end. So yeah. And then finally there's 3 little screws that are meant to be for the bezel to fit onto the other part of the body of a reproducer. And these are not original, actually. I frankly, I lost the 3 original screws, but I found these screws. I actually found them in, like, my little baggie. I have a little baggie of screws, which, very useful. They come in handy. I'd suggest keeping every screw you can. Every screw that you find on a machine and, you know, you can get, or you take off, you know, keep it in a bag. Keep them in bags, sandwich bags, whatever. They're worth their weight in gold. So, very useful. And these are the same, like, thread, I believe, like, cut for these holes. So they actually fit nicely. And they also kind of look nice because they're kind of shiny. So yeah. And I suggest keeping all your screws and parts of a reproducer on a plate or in a bowl or in an ice cube tray to keep track of them. Especially the screws, because they can be annoying and you can lose them. And, well, then you're going to have to search for others. So yeah, that's all the parts. So, you know, flange, body, or bezel, diaphragm, gaskets, needle bar with springs, washers, screw, and screws, and then flange screws, body screws, thumb screw, and then diaphragm, needle bar, foot screw, right there, the small one. So that's all the parts of a reproducer itself. Now I'm going to show you what I use, my tools. So here, this is actually a magnetic bit from this bit set that I have, and it's got all different sizes of flatheads. So I use this. It's very useful. There are other, like, options, but this is just the one I use. And it has different sizes and stuff. You can also get a jeweler's screwdriver kit, which are, like, fancy screws. And those work well. But for small screws, like the diaphragm screw, I use this eyeglass repair kit screw. And I got this at CVS for, like, $1.19. It's from an eyeglass repair kit. And I just took it out there, and the screwdriver works well. And it also helps, if I can get it over here, it also helps to kind of just chip off a little chunk of beeswax, which when you get to actually putting the wax on the diaphragm to seal it, I'll get to that. I just use this to kind of just chip off a little piece, and then I just use that little piece of beeswax, and I'll melt that onto the diaphragm. And of course, I have a chunk of beeswax. Got this from my local Ace Hardware store. It's probably going to last me a lifetime, so maybe get one of these little chunks. You're never going to need to buy a little individually packaged blobs of beeswax again. Very useful. And then I have this product. It's called Never Dull. It's kind of like a little white pad, and you can buy this at any auto body repair store, or like, you know, AutoZone, Pep Boys, anything like that. And it actually works very well to clean and shine the body of a reproducer. I use it actually on a lot of like parts, only nickel plated though. Do not suggest using it on gold plated parts. You do not want to damage that finish, but on nickel plated finishes, it works really well, as you can see with this body. And then I gotta move over to get these last two supplies that I use. Soldering iron. I got this for $8 at AutoZone. Works to melt the beeswax onto the diaphragm, which I'll get to when I get to. And Vaseline. Now, this is optional. You don't have to get it. This is just like dollar store Vaseline, so petroleum jelly, but same thing. And I actually use this to, I'll take a light like coating of it from the container. So like, I'll just like scrape a little bit off with my finger, and then if I have a little bit on my finger, I put it on the inside of a flange. So when I attach the flange to the body of a reproducer, it creates basically an airtight seal. And I don't think it's entirely necessary with like modern rubber flanges, because I guess they're better than the originals. But original Victor pamphlets and like instruction manuals about rebuilding exhibitions that were sent to dealers do include that step to put a light coating of Vaseline on the flange to create a seal. So I do it just, you know, because that's the original instructions. But of course, you don't have to. Only do it if you want to. Now, let's get to assembly. So, I've already got my gaskets pre-cut, basically. So, I'm going to put those right here. And the mica diaphragm, I'm just going to take off everything that I need now. So far, this is what I'm going to need. Now, I'm going to start by attaching the needle bar to the body. So, I have my screwdriver right here. So what I do usually is I take this outside screw where the needle bar is going to be facing like that. My screwdriver rolled away. I take this outside screw first, and I kind of just start it in by hand. Just start it in a little bit by hand. And then once it's in, I take the screwdriver, and then I start screwing it in. And as it gets screwed down, I kind of try and hold this part to these little fulcrum bits. I hold it to them because there are little indentations on this inside part, so you can tell where these little fulcrums are supposed to sit. And then I start the other screw by hand, and I got it a little bit, so take the screwdriver, start screwing it in. Now, what I do, now you want to make sure these nuts are snugged to this part right there. So you're going to make sure those are kind of snug on there, and these are a little tough to get. Sometimes maybe like take tweezers or pliers to kind of, you know, get them and kind of just inch them down the threads. That's what I do. But I kind of had these positioned already before I did this, which is why, you know, I wanted to have these already on there because I wanted to make it easier. Now, what I do is I take one of the gaskets, take the inside one, or the outside one. This is the one that's going to be actually seen. So this gasket, you want to make sure they don't, or, you know, you or whoever's looking at the reproducer, make sure they do not see the seam. Because, you know, the original gaskets that were on these were just little rings that they put in there. But these are tubing, so they don't connect at both ends. And you can use products to seal them, but what I do instead is you just do a little bit of optical trickery. So I'm just gonna hold this here. Basically, what you gotta do is get the gasket in there and try and line up one of the ends right behind the needle bar, and then try and get the other little end, the end that overlaps, get that in there. And there you go. So you have it right behind the needle bar, so it sits behind it, and that's where the seam is going to be. It makes it much, much less visible and works very well to hide it. So that is going to be the outside gasket, the visible one. So you can see it's much harder to see the seam. And I believe I actually did assemble this, but I actually wanted to take it apart for this video, and also because I wanted to remelt the wax because the needle bar was actually a little bent. So I think this might have been the inside gasket, not this outside one, which is why it overlaps so much. So let me check. It doesn't really matter, but you know, just to keep it the same gaskets in the same positions. Try and get it under that needle bar right there. Push that in. And of course, you can always choose, you know, how much you want it to overlap and such. But I always give it quite a bit, because you can always take away from the length of the tubing, but you can't add back. And you don't want to waste tubing. So there you go. Perfect, like that, just under the needle bar. Alright? So you can't see that seam. You cannot see it. It's not visible. Which is nice, presentable. But I don't think it affects sound quality. So now, just drop the mica in there, and I'd say try and center it the best you can. But it doesn't matter because, you know, obviously, I don't know if it'll show up on camera. Let me see if I can get the right angle. There we go. Okay, so you can kind of see the foot of the needle bar isn't exactly touching the mica. So to adjust that, I'm going to take this screw, the outside screw, I'm going to tighten that down. Because when you tighten this outside screw down, the needle bar pushes in towards the mica. And when you screw this screw in more, when you screw this screw in more, it pulls back from the mica, out. So I'm going to screw this in a little bit more until it just barely, like touches the mica, just barely. So don't want to have a mica falling out because I want to be able to see. And also, is this the right bit size? Yes, it is. Tighten it. Let's see, is that touching it? Not yet. So I'm just going to unscrew this a little bit. Can be very hard to get right exactly. Takes a bit of patience. Oh, there we go. It's almost there. Just trying to see if I can. I'm just going to drop the mica so I can grip it properly and screw this in a bit tighter. Let's see. Take the mica. Still got like a millimeter of clearance, so try and see if I can get it in a bit more. I'm gonna switch out my bit. Hold up, just for a slightly thicker one. I don't even know if there is a difference between these two. And you don't want to tighten these too much because you don't want the sound quality to sound like the reproducer's being overloaded or it's blasting. Just a bit more, I think, and it should be good. Alright, let's see. It's about good. It looks to be touching that needle bar. Needle bar looks to be touching the mica. So, now that that's that, I'm going to try and center the mica. It's not always easy to see if it's centered, but you can usually tell by seeing if the hole in the mica lines up with the hole in the needle bar foot. So I want to try and line that up correctly. And usually if that hole is lined up, if both of the holes are lined up, then you know it's just about centered. And, you know, if that's the only way you can get it to line up, then that's your best bet, you know what I mean? So, can be a little bit annoying. And also trying to make sure the camera gets a good angle on this. Lined up. Yep, right, there we go. So, once it's about lined up, you're going to take this diaphragm screw, you're going to want to put it into the hole in the diaphragm and try and see if you can get it started. Now, this can be a bit hard because it's such a small screw. There we go. So, I tighten it down, and you can see that it's secured on there. Just going to, of course, tighten this down just to make sure. Yep, all good. Tighten this bit. Okay, that's about as good as it's going to get. As tight as it's going to get. So, now that you have that, take it out of the gasket. Now that this one's going to be the inside one, you really don't have to, you don't gotta care, you don't gotta worry about, hiding the, split, you know, the little seam, but I just do it near the bottom, you know, relatively near the bottom here, so, you know, it's not super duper visible, but nobody's really going to notice. Definitely. There we go. There we go. So, now we have the gaskets in there. Take the bezel, try and line up those 3 screw holes, and then take those 3 back screws, get them started by hand, I would suggest. And try and also look at the side to make sure they are going into the holes. So this one is at the hole, started right there, and then I get it started halfway, take this side, and then do that, get this other one started, and I like to do these 2, you know, side screws first, because, you know, the top screw is in the middle, so it's easiest to do that one last, because the bezel won't be, you know, moving around when you're screwing these 2 in. I'll just screw them down, not tight, not super tight. And then, of course, last side, or the last screw. So, I take this last screw, and then I tighten it down at the top of the bezel. And so I tighten it down top of the bezel, just like I did the other sides. Tighten that, go over here, tighten that, there we go, and I go over here, and I'm going to want to tighten this. Now the thing is, you got to remember, since these are not the original screws that come with the reproducer, the original screws are more inset. They're concave, not, I guess, convex, kind of like these ones are. But, of course, these still work, and they look fine. You know, not super jarring. So now, I'm going to get into the most dangerous part of this, which is the wax. Oh, there we go. The wax. Now, I'm going to take my tiny little screwdriver. Just going to kind of chip off just a little bit of this wax. beeswax. And I'm going to roll it into a ball in my finger. I didn't get a big enough chunk. Hold up. I'm going to roll it into a ball. I'll put that away. It's fine. I'll put that away.
Do you want a second fork?
No, I'm doing something. You don't want to roll it into a ball in your finger. I'm sorry, my grandma's in the room. I can move a chair if you want. Okay. So, I'm rolling the wax into a little glob. Right there. Little glob of wax. You don't want to make 2 little globs of wax. Make one slightly smaller than the other. Not by a ton, but I do suggest making it smaller. So, it's a little bit too big. I'm going to cut that in half. And I'm going to cut a little bit off. There we go. Alright. Now, got 2 little globs of wax. Oh, well, I dropped one of them. But I have 2 globs of wax. Now, these little pieces of wax are going to go in 2 places on the diaphragm. One glob, the slightly smaller one, so this one. So, wait. That's the larger one, that's the smaller one. Take the smaller one first, and put the larger one to the side. I'm going to want to take the smaller one, and I usually like to just take it, just kind of get my finger in there, inside of there, through the back, and I usually just stick the beeswax right on the back of a flange screw, or on the needle bar foot screw, back on the side where the flange is going to go. And I'm just going to move it over onto the screw a bit more. So you have to be careful not to scratch the mica. Obviously, I'm just going to put it on there, put it, there we go. I'm going to press it down right there, over the screw, like that. That's what it looks like from this side. Now, I'm going to take my soldering iron, I'm going to go plug this in. Now, this will take a couple minutes to heat up, so I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'm going to let it heat up, and I'm going to show you how I melt the beeswax with the soldering iron. Alright, so my soldering iron is heated up. It's right here. It's very hot. The tip is very hot. Don't touch it. You can hurt yourself. So, now that I have the beeswax in this side of the diaphragm, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my soldering iron. I'm going to take it. I'm holding it like this because the camera's in at a weird angle because I have to support it with something. Take it. I'm going to hold it right here on this side of the needle bar. I'm going to just touch that up against it. And the heat is going to basically travel through the needle bar and then over to the screw and heat it up. It's going to melt the wax. Now it usually takes a minute or so. So I'm just gonna pull up my seat, pull up a chair, and kind of just sit so you can get a good angle. And then when the wax is fully heated up, it's bubbling, it's now liquid. Take the soldering iron off of it, and as you can see, the wax is melted over the diaphragm. Takes maybe like 30 seconds to harden. It's hardening right now. So once it's kind of opaque like that, you can see it is hardened. So I'm just going to take the camera, hold up. I'm going to take the camera, you can see that wax in there is hardened. And that creates an airtight seal around the diaphragm on that side. Now I'm going to head over here. This is what I was using to support my camera. I'm going to take this bigger blob of wax. And I'm going to just come over to the wax, or come over to the diaphragm again. And now, don't touch the needle bar. It is hot. I'm not trying to touch it, you know. Don't, like, grab it. I'm just kind of placing the wax. Oh, my goodness. Wax, move. Move, wax. Trying to place it basically on the foot of the needle bar on this side. Like that, kind of. yeah, about there. Press it on so it touches foot, like that. So it's going to melt over it. Now, take the soldering iron, do the exact same thing. It's like that, kind of bubbling up, you know, it's coming clear, and I wait until it becomes fully clear. Can't see that little white spot, gone, and I take the soldering iron off, and I'm going to set it back down here, and I'm just gonna unplug it because I want to let it cool off. Don't touch it until it cools off, but do let the wax cool off. You can see it's gotten nearly opaque. Just, let's see if you can focus. Camera, you want to focus? There you go. That is sealed around the foot of a needle bar. Both sides. Creates an airtight seal. It's essential because you don't want to have little rattling sound. If you do forget that, the reproducer will kind of rattle. Now, finally, I'm gonna set the camera back up on the box of paint, and then, oh, excuse my burp. And then I'm gonna put the flange on, screw the thumb screw in, and then I'll test this out. And I would also say, don't, like, you know, putting the flange on doesn't take long, but maybe give the reproducer about an hour to sit. Like, give the wax, mainly for the wax, you know, don't play it immediately. I don't know if that really will affect it, how it plays, but I do it just to let the wax kind of settle. Even though, you know, it's obviously already a solid again, I just do it just in case. You can never be too safe when rebuilding one of these. And you can see, needle bar, it's pretty much straight. It's a little bent. I don't know why it's like that, but I'm not going to try and, like, bend it back with pliers. But yeah, you can see that seam right there. Let's see if I can zoom in. See that seam? It's hidden right underneath the needle bar. So, can't see it. But, yeah, I'm going to set it back up, and I'm going to show you how to install the flange. Alright, I think the camera's set up. It's not going to fall. So now, take Vaseline, take this. Now this part, it does help to have maybe someone else hold the reproducer like this while you can try and fit the flange on. But I'm just going to do it with, you know, normal two hands. You know, that's the limitation of having two hands. You should just get another hand, honestly. It would be really useful for repairs like this. Get like a robot arm. So I'm just taking a very, very light coat of Vaseline, and I'm just putting it on. There. So you can see, light coat of Vaseline on there. Take the flange screws, and then put those in. And then I'm going to put those kind of through. It helps to line it up. You know, when you do, there's a little Vaseline, but it's okay. Now, take a screwdriver, and remember, when putting the flange on, you're going to want the metal pin to be in the 1 o'clock position. So you don't want it to be on the bottom, you want it to be basically on the top. So I like to get the top screw started by hand. So push that in, get that started by hand. And then I get the bottom screw. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, looks like I got the bottom screw started by hand. Now top screw. Take my screwdriver. And then I just get it in. There we go. I'm gonna be careful. And these are repro screws from Brian Parlier. Same with the flange, I believe, and his stock is all stock from Ron Sitko, who sadly passed. And Brian sells all the supplies and stuff on his website via Phonographs shop, which I'm going to include in the description, as a resource. It also has resources for learning and stuff. So, you know, very good site. Brian is a great guy. So, yeah, and I'm just going to take my shirt, just wipe off any Vaseline or whatnot, if there is any. And, yeah, that's pretty much it. Repair is complete, and take the thumb screw. I'm going to put that into the needle chuck. Screw it in all the way, and I do this just to make sure everything's all good. Make sure there's no rattling. I take it, screw the thumb screw in all the way. Shake it. No rattle. No rattle. So, that is how to rebuild a Victor exhibition. I'm going to let this sit for a bit, not sure how long, and then I'll play a record with it and demonstrate what it'll sound like. Alright, so I now have a reproducer on a Victor machine. This is a Victor Victrola IV. Basically, it fits on by... Here, I'll actually try and get it off. Just put the camera down, try and pull it off just to show. I can't do this because I only have two hands, but basically how it works is this pin goes through... There we go. Goes through that whole part and then goes back. So yeah. Here, let me try and put it on. Gotta put it in. I gotta do this with two hands. I hold the tone arm with one hand and then the reproducer with the other. And then take it, put it back, and it puts it at the perfect angle to play a record. So, here's my test record. Whispering by Paul Whiteman. Very popular song, sold 1 million, first song actually to sell 1 million copies, I believe. Yep. So let's hear how it sounds. There we go. But yeah, so you get the point. I'm not going to play the whole length of a record because I don't want to bother my grandmother. She's downstairs watching shows. But that is what it sounds like, rebuilt. That is using one of these brilliant tone, I believe these are medium tone needles. So yeah, brand new. You know, don't use a needle more than once, of course. And remember not to play electrically recorded discs on exhibitions because they have mica diaphragms, which can be very easily overloaded by the frequencies of electrically recorded discs, because obviously these do not have as high of a frequency response as orthophonic reproducers do. But that is what a properly rebuilt exhibition should basically sound like. And this song is a period-appropriate disc, released in 1920. Flip side is the Japanese Sandman, one of my personal favorites. And of course, the Victor Victrola IV originally came with an exhibition reproducer standard, and I believe you could also opt in to get a number 2 reproducer later on. But yeah, so of course put these on period-appropriate machines as well. And yeah, that's basically my video. I hope it provided clear instructions and tips on how to rebuild an exhibition, and I hope if you do attempt a rebuild, it goes well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something. Have a good day and or night.